Hello and welcome back to the Trinity League Football Podcast. I'm Dan Albano here, talking to you on Monday, September 3rd, Labor Day edition of the Trinity League Football Podcast, joined once again by our insider, Scotty Barajas. Scotty, how you doing this evening?
I'm pretty good, Dan. I've recouped from last weekend. I was dead tired coming back from that Vegas weekend. We've opened up to another wild week, depending on what side of the craziness you were on. We had games come down to a 2-point conversion, 2 blowout wins with an insane amount of penalties. We can touch on that in a little bit. A team came down from out of state, took out one of our Trinity League teams in kind of a bit of an upset with the Cherry Creek besting Santa Margarita. And, it was just another good week of football where we're looking forward to talking about.
Yeah, it was a surprisingly kind of a sneaky good week. I mean, coming off the epic week 1, which was just insane from, all those great games that we talked about. I think this week definitely snuck up on some people. So we want to thank all the listeners for joining us this evening and again this week on the Trinity League Football Podcast. And please share this podcast with your friends and your hardcore football fans, high school SoCal football fans, even national football fans throughout the country, because that's what Scotty and I are working. We're trying to bring you in-depth look at the Trinity League. So just to set the table tonight, we will be reviewing the games from last week. We got 5 games last week. We'll have our analysis of those games. We'll have our players of the week and our weekly grades. And then we're going to move on to the games for coming up on Friday, September 7th. We have, and there's one game on Saturday, September 8th. That's going to be JSerra is playing on Saturday. And Orange Lutheran is on the bye this week. So last week it was Servite on the bye. This week it's the Lancers. So, and then at the end of the show, we're going to give some of our thoughts on the debut at USC of some pretty notable Trinity League alums. And that would be JT Daniels at quarterback for USC and Amon-Ra St. Brown at wide receiver for USC. Scotty and I both watched that game on TV and have a couple opinions to share on those guys who we've seen so much over the years. So, Scotty, let's begin our recap with a really good game on Friday. This is August 31st, Friday nights. Cherry Creek of Colorado came in to Orange County and defeated Santa Margarita 21-14. We saw some of the, we saw another, pretty good effort by Jake Thomas running the ball. Now leads the Trinity League in rushing touchdowns, I believe, with 6. So he had 2 more. But we, got the expected, inconsistency at times, but showing his potential. And Peter Castelli didn't have a touchdown pass in this game. But, hey, he's a sophomore and playing a really good team. But, Scotty, what was your breakdown of this game?
Yeah, last week we mentioned the number of D1 commits Cherry Creek had on its roster, and that could be interesting with this game. And it certainly was the makings of a Trinity League-like game because It was a hard-fought, tough battle in the trenches type of game. But Santa Margarita fell short on this one. The Eagles were down 14-0, before Jake Thomas could put the Eagles on the board with his 22-yard run, cutting the lead in half. The Cherry Creek basically added another score to make it 21-7 at the half. And then the Eagles added another score to get it 21-14 to end the third. So they were back and forth. And then after that, that was all the scoring for the game. And then it ended up being the final. Caselli struggled a little bit, 52% on 18 of 34 passing, 198, no touchdowns, in the pick. But defensively, the Eagles, gave up 300 yards. 151 passing to 131 rushing to Cherry Creek. But it was apparently the size of Cherry Creek that kind of gave Santa Margarita the trouble, especially their 6', 225-pound junior running back, Jalen Stacks, who broke a number of tackles during his 101 yards rushing in this one score. So, you could take away what you want out of this game, and it was close. The Eagles, could have been on the other side of the win. But like we said, this was a Trinity-like game as far as it came down to the trenches in a hard-fought battle with both defenses, to the very end.
Yeah, obviously a great tune-up game if that's indeed the physicalness and the size that Santa Margarita encountered. That's what they're going to see in Mater Dei. That's what they're going to see in St. John Bosco for sure. I think Servite and Orange Lutheran has some good size as well. JSerra's got some size, so this is a good tune-up for him. Like I said, like you said, Castelli, the completion percentage was low. He had an interception, but didn't have as many interceptions as he did the previous week against Mission Viejo. So some progress there. He is getting Chase Neand going. Chase, the junior, good sized kid at receiver, 8 catches for 100 yards. And like we said, Jake Thomas is very productive, and I think they strive for some balance, and they found it. They ran the ball 28 times and they passed it 34 times. So they're on a 2-game slide. I think they'll get back in the win column, but against 2-game slide against Mission Viejo, Cherry Creek, and working their way toward obviously the Trinity League. What was your grades for Santa Margarita, Scotty, in this one?
I'll give them a C minus and a C plus. C minus on offense, C plus on defense.
Okay. All right. Let's move to maybe the game of the night last week. JSerra survives by the slimmest of margins, 21-20 on the road against Bishop Amat. Bishop Amat electing to go for 2 points in this game, didn't convert, so they were gutty going for it, which I certainly respect. But JSerra, almost got rallied upon. The Lancers scored 13 points all in the fourth, and those 13 points really make it close in the fourth quarter. And this is after after JSerra started so well. Sammy Green with a big kickoff return for a touchdown, to really ignite the night for JSerra. But hey, JSerra is 3-0, still not still playing without Munar McLean, USC commit, coming off the Calabasas. On the road, you'll take a win against a pretty good Division 1 foe, but some red flags going up. But JSerra, has the makings of a good start here. They're going to get another extra day this week to get ready for a Saturday game. But what did you think of this game, Scotty?
How we're always talking about football's a game of momentum, and the slightest play can turn a game around, and that's basically what happened here. This wasn't an offensive juggernaut between either team. Amat finished with 271 total offense to JSerra's 224 yards of total offense. But JSerra pretty much had this game in check late in the third when JSerra was ready to go up 3 scores. And then Caden Bell had his pass tipped at the line of scrimmage and it was intercepted. Then Amat goes 90 on a 92-yard drive, aided by a 60-yard pass down to the 11-yard line. And the next play, Archuleta scores on a Bryce Young-like scramble to bring the score to 21-14 early in the fourth. Back and forth, Amat gets the ball again. They score with 1:20 on the clock, brings the game to 21-20, and that's when Amat elects to go for 2, fails as the pass falls incomplete. Marks the second straight week, though, JSerra didn't rely on its offense to lead the way because they only scored 2 offensive TDs in this one, as you said, with Sammy Green taking the opening kickoff for a score. And then Caden Bell was only 7-17 for 87 yards and 1 interception.
Yeah.
And he's only thrown for 318 on 3 games, and he's under 50% at 47% on the year. Like Olu we've talked about with its running game, JSerra is going to have to show it can throw the ball more consistently because their running game right now is consistent, but it hasn't shown to be dominant performance because they're only averaging about 6.8 per carry, and it's getting done. But right now it's obvious their defense has been keeping them in the games with all those pick sixes and punt returns for scores. So they're going to need a big offensive output, and it's not going to get easy this week with Arizona's number 2 ranked Pinnacle team coming in.
Yes.
And for their grades, I give their offense a C and their defense a B+.
Okay. Yeah, if you look at the quarterback rating for Caden Bell, senior committed to Columbia, who's coming off a great summer. I thought he looked really good in the season opener. I saw him play at against Corona Del Mar. I thought he looked great there, and I haven't seen him play since then. But his quarterback rating in that game was tough. When you complete only 40% of your passes, 41% of your passes, and you have an interception, throw for under 100 yards. I mean, he finishes with a quarterback rating of 33%, 33. And then Archuleta on the other side, Blake Archuleta, another senior. I mean, he completed 64% of his passes for 180 yards, 2 T's, no pick. He's got a quarterback rating of 112. So, obviously, but Caden did run for 38, helping his cause, did break a 20-yard run. He is a dual threat. Maybe they need to get him, come up with some other things to help him get going, where he is a kid that moves well. I'm not sure how much they're moving the pocket with him or not. Chris Street did run for 97 on 17 carries, but they didn't really feature anybody else outside of that too much. They were, again, pretty balanced. 23 carries, 17 passes for the Lions. So, but again, 3-0. So definitely, I think you're right on, Scotty, that they have to work on their passing game. The Lions do. Let's go to St. John Bosco, who moves to 3-0, 52-14 victory over Milani of Hawaii. This was a outstanding effort by quarterback for the Braves. DJ threw 6 touchdown passes. The junior, no picks. He had a quarterback rating off the charts, but he was the story. He spread it around very nicely. What was your thoughts on this victory by the Braves?
Yeah, so this one had the makings for a better matchup in the beginning, but it kind of yielded the same results and kind of the blowout with the 52 points scored, and they gave up the 14. But it didn't start out that way, because Mililani came out and put up points first, against Bosco, and that was the first points they allowed all year with the long TD pass to put them up 7-0. But Bosco answered right back with the 78-yard run by George Alani. Then Bosco went to the air for the first of DJ Unalalehi's 6 TDs, where he hit Jake Bailey for a 16-yard score. Then Milani added one more score, but Bosco was already in control of this game. And Colby Bowman led the receiving corps with 9 receptions for 130 yards and 3 touchdowns. Kind of got him back into the mix because he kind of been quiet for the last 2 games. And then defensively, Cole Aubrey recorded 4 sacks and then get this, for a 3rd consecutive game, Titus Toller added an interception, but this coming off of a blocked field goal. Yes, I said blocked field goal.
Wow.
After the kick got blocked, the kicker picked the ball up and then tried to attempt to pass, and then Toller picked it off. So he has 3 picks in 3 games. So, and Bosco also had a goal line stand right before the half, shutting out Milani's from getting any points. But it wasn't all pretty, because Bosco committed 21 penalties.
Wow.
And it's a reoccurring theme that we're going to been seeing with these lopsided losses and I'm going to say ever aggressive teams. And we'll talk more about that, because there was another game that had a lot of penalties as well. But besides the flags, Bosco's team speed and strength was, again, you could just see it in their highlights and in the game film for this Hawaiian school. But I give them an A and an A, or A+. I mean, there were no weaknesses at all in this game.
Yeah, I agree with those grades, definitely, Scotty. All right, let's move on, and we thank everyone for joining us once again on the Trinity League Football Podcast, where we're reviewing last week's games on August 31st. Mater Dei also goes to 2-1. Of course, they have the forfeit loss, but they won 49-0 at La Mirada. And that's the Monarchs' 2nd straight shutout. So this was their encore performance. They had defeated the previous week Bishop Gorman 42-0. So and then all 49 they scored 42 points at halftime. They were up 42-0. Then they added just a touchdown run in the middle of the 3rd quarter by McDonald, a 17-yard run. And that was it. So a lot of this damage was done in the first half for Mater Dei. They were tremendous on defense. They really, their stats, interesting stat. You probably have this, Scotty, but La Mirada finished with, negative 100 yards rushing. They did not net very positive yards at all. While Mater Dei rushed for 116 on 22 carries. Bryce Young threw 4 touchdowns, completed 12 of 15. But I think it was that defensive line and the linebackers just must have been tremendous. But you were at this game, Scotty. What was your takeaway?
Yeah, I mean, like the Bosco games, there's not a lot to say here except for that, from an offensive standpoint, Mater Dei spread the ball around in this one, getting everyone involved with some new names, getting some touches. But probably the most talked about thing was the needing to clean up the penalties. And this one Mater Dei had 16 penalties in all. And most of them seem to be with the over-aggressive nature, hands to the face on both sides of the ball. They weren't necessarily, penalty, personal fouls. There was a lot of late. Ended up being like a lot of late hits. But the most interesting thing was that they came in the second quarter when the game was well in hand, but like 28-0, and so that's something that we could talk about later on about seeing these other games where these out of hand games get a lot of penalties. You almost think that the officials are trying to keep the game close or down, but that's just something we can discuss for another time. But offensively, Cam Gardner and Cody Epps kind of registered their first offensive stats for the season. Epps hauled in a nice corner of the end zone toe tap, much like he did in that Mission Viejo passing tournament game we saw.
Yep.
But a lot of people say that he didn't get the toe down before his lead foot hit first, but it was still beautiful, But then probably the highlight of the night was Brew McCoy turned a 3rd and 30 into an 86-yard gain. He took a wide receiver screen, cut across the field, went down the sideline, straight-armed the defender, but he actually pulled him down. What appeared to be a touchdown, but the official marked him on the 1-yard line.
Oh.
So he had all that, and they didn't give him the touchdown. It was close, but it would have given Brew 2 touchdowns on 2 catches because he scored earlier on like a wide receiver toss pass. And then later on, Martinez added 2 more highlight catches, dragging in defenders 10 yards out into the end zone. If you get to see that one, he catches with the one when he has like the ball, looks like a tennis ball in his hand, and he's dragging defenders 40 yards in for a 19-yard score and a 40-yard reception. And then defensively, Mater Dei's first team defense, like I said, pretty much held them to negative yards, like you had mentioned. And then they also had 5 different players record sacks. Brew was one of those, so he's up to 5 on the year. But pretty much they were done. I mean, Brew didn't even half of those starters didn't even. They probably played midway through the second quarter, and then everybody was out by the second half. So they got like an A minus for both sides.
Okay.
Maybe downgrade a little bit with the penalties, but other than that, it was still. Got to see big scoring plays, even though it was against La Mirada. So
yeah, winless La Mirada. Jacobo Fuamatu had one of those sacks as well. So did Ware Hudson as well. Also forced a fumble. So he had an excellent game, the defensive lineman. So a couple of those defensive guys getting it going. But yeah, the penalties were approaching 200 yards, 16 penalties for 184 yards. So probably everybody out there wondering, well, how did La Mirada do on the penalties? Only called for 3 for 25 yards. So that was a discrepancy there. Mater Dei 16 for 184. La Mirada 3 penalties, 25 yards.
Yeah, like I said, it was and those who saw the game, you couldn't figure out why. I mean, they had 3 because they had 3 of the sacks came in the first quarter, and the kid was just getting blitzed and drilled. And then the second quarter came, and I think they threw 3 consecutive late hits on the quarterback, and they were like questionable. They were close, but I think they were trying to protect the kid because he was just getting beat up. So. And then again, the hands of the face, the linemen, they get their hands up blocking, and I think they get too much under the trench strap. And then in high school, and that's you get under the face mask, and they call that a penalty. So Mater Dei, they were getting those on both sides of the ball. Now, whether or not this crew was more conscious of it, but it may happen, and it doesn't get called as much as we think. So But like you said, I mean, we'll just have to, hopefully these over-aggressive teams somehow, they're able to come together and come to an agreement to where they allow the kids to play and they're not, flagging them for everything, take away the fun from the game. So
yeah. Now let's talk about the last game of the week was Orange Lutheran defeating Vista Marietta back at Orange Coast College 42-17. Kind of an interesting box score because after the end of the first quarter, Vista Marietta, which was coming off a victory against Los Al, was up 3-0. But then Orange Lutheran exploded for 21 points in the second quarter and 21 points in the third quarter to take control. That was their 42 points right there. So, and the Lancers didn't score in the fourth quarter. Ryan Olinsky had one of his better games of the year. Completed 68% of his passes, the South Carolina commit, 17 of 25, 3 touchdowns, and that's where I think he can be. He's a 70% passer. I think he can get above. I think he can be 71 or 72% this year. I think he's that good. Orange Lutheran also ran Reggie Strong season high 7 times for 47 yards, and that's kind of big because we've been wondering about Mr. Strong, a senior. So only 7 carries, but 47 yards shows. I mean, he averages 7 yards a carry almost. Shows what he can do, and he ran for 2 TDs, but it was still a small sample size, and they only finished with 61 yards as a team. So they showed a little bit of Reggie Strong, and I think we talked about the Lancers trying to diversify their offense, and I think they definitely did that. They had Logan Loya with his best game, 7 catches for 116 yards and a touchdown, and Josiah Hawkins, JoJo Hawkins continues his outstanding play, 5 catches for 42 yards. Of course, Kyle Ford caught 2 TDs. He leads the Trinity League in touchdown receptions. But Scotty, signs of progress. What did you think of the Lancers?
Dan, you and I are like spot on because I had the same pretty much assessment that you did as far as, them being down first quarter. Then they came back to score the 21 points. And then, Reggie Strong scoring his 2 touchdowns and finishing with the season high, 7 carries, because up to that point, no Olu ball carrier had more than 6 carries in a game. And like you had said, they committed more in the run. They ran for a season high 16 times, but like you said, only for 61. Then the second half, they went back to opening up the offense. Olinsky threw 2 of his 3 touchdowns in the second half. Loya led with 7 for 116 and 1 touchdown. Then Kyle Ford only caught 3 balls on the night, but 2 went for scores. Defensively, Olu dominated. I mean, they shut down Vista Marietta. They didn't allow a touchdown because both Vista scores came on a pick 6 on Olinsky's first interception of the year, and then a fumble, scoop, and score. Right. And then Jackson Cloyd was the third different Lancer in the last 3 games to register double-digit tackles with 15. He had 2 sacks. Like said, you mentioned the special teams came up big with Reggie Strong added a block punt, and then JoJo Hawkins returning a kickoff 99 yards for a TD. And then equally as impressive, the O-line didn't give up a sack for the first time this season. And so there were shades of improvement. So there were shades of improvement, but they still need to get their rushing totals up as the Lancers have only managed 273 yards rushing in 3 games on 60 carries, which averages 4.6 yards, which isn't great. It's not bad, but it's not great. They're nearing 100 yards per game. But in comparison, after 3 games last season, this is a comparison now. Olu ran for 251 yards last year on 75 carries for a 3.3 average. So they've improved slightly on yards, plus 23, and slightly on the average, plus 1 yard basically. But they're going to need more of that come league. So I'm going to throw this out there. Olu ran for 396 yards in Trinity League last year for an average of 3.3, and they scored 3 touchdowns. Now, all 3 touchdowns and 171 yards came against one team, Servite. Okay, so right there, they're on a similar pace, So that's something to keep an eye on, because they cannot do that same thing. Otherwise, they may be, again, on that winless side of Trinity League, because those teams are just going to tee off on him if they try to throw the ball 40 times again. So that's just something to keep an eye on, because those are what the numbers present. So, and on grades, the grades offensively, for this game, I gave them a B offensively and an A+ defense.
All right. Well, great research, Scotty, and this would be a great week with Olu having the bye. I got to check in with Coach Presley about some of this stuff at Olu, because that would be shocking for them to go 0-5 again with that kind of talent. But they're just so different. At least they've shown to be so different than the rest of their teams when it comes to the ground game, because we know how well JSerra runs the ball. We know how well St. John Bosco runs the ball.
Yeah, I know that's they were by far the lowest number of rushing yards by any team, but you got to have that balance. I don't know whether they have the same. The offensive line's a lot better, so that's what I said. So the offensive line should hold up better as far as their passing, but whether or not yes, it's a big stretch to say they're going to go 0-5, but it's still that same pace. I don't know if in the Trinity League you can run for that. You can. So you just have to wait to see.
And Mater Dei can run the ball, we know, with their running back duo of Jacoby Harper and Sean Dollars and Bryce Young. We know Santa Margarita, Jake Thomas is having a great year. Every game he's been over 100 yards. He's already rushed for, I think, a Trinity League leading 6 touchdowns. Servite hasn't, obviously they only have the 2 games. They're probably the other team that hasn't run the ball that well, though they made some strides in their last game against Norco. But so some, and I definitely hope to get some audio and some interviews from Orange Lutheran for the next Trinity League Football Podcast. So everyone, stick with us for that. So Scotty, before we preview this week's games, let us continue here on the Trinity League Football Podcast with our Players of the Week. So let's get back to our Players of the Week for Santa Margarita from that game against Cherry Creek.
So I basically went with Jake Thomas. Again, he led the way. He had 111 yards, and he had, like you said, he added 2 more touchdowns to his Trinity League total. And the defensive player of the game, Matt Lynch, 11 tackles, and he had 2 tackles for loss.
Right. Yeah, these 3-game sample sizes are always pretty important, because that's a good sample size when it comes to football. 3 games, on the recruiting front, kids start to send out film. Colleges want to see, some film after 3 games. And right now, Jake Thomas is the second leading rusher in the Trinity League with 302 yards, just 32 yards behind Chris Street, who's got 334. And like we said, Jake Thomas with those 6 rushing touchdowns. He's been very consistent, and those lead the Trinity League. Sean Dollars is not far behind at 5, and George Helani's got 4. So those are a couple guys. Chris Street's got 4. But those are Players of the Week for Santa Margarita. Let's switch back here to St. John Bosco. Got to believe that the quarterback DJ is the Offensive Player of the Week. For the Braves' performance against Milani.
Yes, he's indeed DJ Unalalehi for his 26 of 32 for 373 and the 6 touchdowns. And then defensive player goes to Cole Aubrey with his 4 sacks, and he probably could have had 6 on the night because he was in the backfield so quick, and he had, I think, 2 or 3 other hurries. So, he could have tacked on 2 more. But, so Cole Aubrey, defensive player of the game.
All right. So checking out with some of these, it's a great junior duo in the Trinity League this year with DJ and Bryce Young. Bryce Young already committed to USC. Recruiting world wondering about DJ. Leads the Trinity League so far his junior season, 12 touchdowns now. That's a league high. Only the 1 pick. He's passed for 722 yards, which is behind Olinsky, who leads the Trinity League in yards at 834. But quarterback rating, no one's higher than DJ with a 145.3 quarterback rating, which is almost 20 points higher than Bryce Young. So two of the best juniors around right there. So DJ getting it done, off to a great start. Hasn't faced the competition maybe that Bryce Young has faced, or even Olinsky, but still great start for DJ. Let's get to we talked about JSerra next. How about your players of the week for JSerra in that 1-point victory against Bishop Amat?
I had pretty much Chris Street for his 2 touchdowns. He had a long of 21, I think, and he had 97 yards rushing. He was kind of pretty much the catalyst for that group. And then as far as defensive player of the game, I don't have anybody of note that had anything that stood out. They didn't have any sacks. I didn't see any tackles for loss. They didn't have any picks, sixes for touchdowns. So we just give it to that they're all-out defensive unit for keeping them in the game, because they've been doing it all year as a group. So
yeah, I think let's give it to Sammy Green as a special teamer. And the JSerra special teams have been outstanding. Like we've mentioned,
yes.
I saw them in the opening game of the season where they've been doing a great job on kickoff returns. They did that against Corona Del Mar. They blocked a punt against Corona Del Mar. And speaking of that defense, Scotty, of course, obviously Mater Dei's defense might be among the best so far. St. John Bosco's has been outstanding as well, only allowing 4.5 points. They have 2 shutouts. But then you have to look at JSerra only allowing 16 points on so far an average on defense, where they shut down Corona Del Mar to 7. They held Calabasas, a really talented Calabasas team, to 21, and they held Bishop Amat to 20. So that's what you like to see. And like you said, some of this stuff, that's consistent play. So so yeah, not a bad decision. Just give it to the Lions defense. All right, let's talk about Mater Dei. Who are their players of the game for the Monarchs in that 49-zip win against La Mirada?
I had Bryce Young. He was 12 of 15 for 250, 4 touchdowns. He did have a 1 pick, but the 1 pick wasn't his fault. It hit the guy in the shoulder pads, bounced off in the air, and they picked it off. That was all in the first half. And then for the defensive player of the game, I gave it to the team defense with the 5 different players recording sacks. So you had Brew McCoy, Kobo Fuamatu, Keon Ware Hudson, sophomore Tyler Naharian, and sophomore Josh Saggio. And all of them were in the first half except for one was in the second half.
Yeah, team defense for sure, because it was pretty well spread out. Nobody went crazy on the tackles as far as double digits. The guys just didn't play long enough. La Mirada didn't give them a good enough look to get those kind of tackles. And let's go to Olu in that 42-7 victory against Vista Marietta. Who are your players of the game for the Lancers?
I give this one offense to Logan Loya. He actually came out, had the 7 catches for the game high, 116 in the TD. And then defensive player of the game, Jackson Cloyd, with his 15 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and the 2 sacks. Yeah,
like you said, I agree with both of those picks. When it comes to total tackles, Jackson Cloyd is right up there. 29 total tackles so far in 3 games, which is second in the Trinity League to Connor Burke, middle linebacker for Santa Margarita's, just got 31. So just a tad behind the lead there. Zach Brogdon, another outstanding linebacker for Orange Lutherans, got 29 too. So they're tied, those 2 Lancers. And Cole Aubrey, who we mentioned, comes in at 26 tackles. So those are a couple of your tackle leaders through 3 games in the Trinity League. All right, Scotty, well, that's our Players of the Week, and congrats to all of the players. And if you happen to be a business out there and be interested in sponsoring any of these Players of the Week, we could use a sponsor. On these athletes, the Players of the Week for the Trinity League. So if you know anybody, reach out to me on Twitter. I'm at OCVarsity Guy on Twitter, and would love to talk about any kind of sponsorships that you might help recognize these fine players in the Trinity League. So, Sky, let's talk about the games this week coming up here. Like we said, 4 games on Friday, September 7th, and we got the one, which is going to be in Moore Park, and that's going to be on Saturday the 8th, and that's going to be JSerra taking on Pinnacle of Phoenix, Arizona. But we'll save that one for last. But let's talk about the Friday games. Because we haven't talked about the whole show here, Scotty. We haven't talked about Friars because they've been on a break. They were on the bye, and they come back at home. They go right back to Cerritos College, so they haven't had to travel yet too far, Servite. And they take on Roosevelt of the Inland Empire. So what do you think about Servite? Roosevelt 2-1. They're from that Big 8 league. This is a 7 o'clock kickoff at Cerritos College.
I think most would have Roosevelt coming into this one 3-0, but surprisingly, they got kind of routed by a Tesoro team last week, 35-16, and which kind of goes to show you the quality of their 2 wins. Burn weren't that stout because they're against Glendora and Rancho Cucamonga, and Rancho Cucamonga isn't the same Rancho they've normally been.
Yeah.
And then Servite comes into this similar to last year, because as Roosevelt was that top-rated Division I team, and then the Friars, basically took it to them, giving them like a physical beatdown last year that probably wasn't, foreseen. I don't know if it's going to be the same physical pounding, but I do know that Servite is playing with gaining confidence, and they're not going to make it easy on Roosevelt, so it wouldn't be a surprise to see Servite go to 3-0.
Yeah, I like the Friars coming off the bye against a team that's hasn't certainly has struggles. They in Roosevelt, the Mustangs barely beat Rancho Cucamonga 18-14 in their season opener, and Rancho Cucamonga's 0-2, and then Glendora, who's not hearing too much out of the from them this year. They're 2-1, but they're not supposed to be too strong. They're actually a Division 5 team, and Roosevelt beat them 48-21. So I like the Friars to get this win, but we'll see what kind of adjustments that Coach Tommy Leach at Roosevelt will be making, because I put out there on social media that I was so impressed with Tesoro's defense, and I was, this year Matt Poston, the head coach at Tesoro, he's gone back to being the defensive coordinator. I called him on social media, Scotty. I called him a defensive witch, because he's just a great defensive coordinator. And the Titans have holding teams to only 6.5 points a game, and they're 3-0, and I think they look like an Orange County top 10 team. This is so just to kind of compare it and set it up for Servite. Tesoro's they beat Edison 17-6. And then they beat Knight of Palmdale, not a very good team, 39-7. But then, a pretty good Roosevelt team that Servite's going to be facing, 35-6. So pretty interesting there. But I think both Scotty and I are taking the Friars in this Trinity League game here. Let's also move on here on Friday, Scotty. Mater Dei is taking on 0-2. Kind of surprisingly, 0-2 St. Mary's of Stockton. This was a team that won a lot of games last year in St. Mary's. I don't know what's exactly has happened, but they're 0-2. This is a team that won 11-3 last year out of the Sac Joaquin section. But Scotty, what's your thoughts on Mater Dei, where this is the big one? They're going to be on their bye after this, and then they take on IMG. They're going to want to finish off strong, but I think they're looking at a third straight shutout victory.
Yeah, that's St. Mary's is off to a slow start. Like you mentioned, 0-2, dropping the first 2 games, 48-7 to Pittsburgh and 33-20 to Central Catholic. And I don't think going into this season anyone had the Rams going 0-2 into the Mater Dei game, especially coming off of an 11-3 season. The Rams were supposed to play Jordan of Utah in their first game, but that didn't happen. Fell off the schedule, so they had to pick up Pittsburgh, who was a late add in May, and Pittsburgh was the D1 state finalist, losing to Narbonne 28-21.
Right.
So then they came back and then they get beat by a Central Catholic team, which they beat last season. So St. Mary's lost most of their offensive firepower from last year. So, like we had said, they look probably for another running clock.
Yeah. That Pittsburgh team, that was, sometimes that can really derail a season. But that Pittsburgh team is a team that played, they lost their first game to Clayton Valley, 38-31. And then they came back and they beat St. Mary's. And then they played, and then they actually played Centennial Corona and got blown out. So I don't know. I know that's a good Pittsburgh team, but Clayton Valley's pretty good. They're 3-0. They're a Division I team, but they didn't. Pittsburgh didn't show much against Centennial, which doesn't bode well for St. Mary's. So, like you said, it could be running clock. But it is surprising. I didn't expect this to be like this for Mater Dei. What do you think about how do you think this is an important game for Mater Dei, where this is their last game before the IMG and then a bye? It might be hard to focus them when you haven't had some really competitive games, in a couple weeks here, Scotty.
No, yeah, their focus is going to be the penalties. Bottom line, I think they're on a mission and they're focused as far as what they did in Gorman and what they've done as far as their mantra or them against the world. Right. So I think in that aspect they're good. It's just a matter of having to dial it in and not make those dumb, unfocused mistakes, because their athleticism is actually going to is going to overtake these other teams. But when you start playing better teams, the athleticism it's going to cancel each other out. So they just need to get in, get out, do what they are supposed to do, and then go to work for the next couple of weeks or the next week in preparation for IMG. And just to toss out those who are following or looking forward to that IMG game, they won their past game, Norland of Florida, 49-14 or 49-14 this past week. So
okay, yeah, IMG 2-0, right?
Yes.
All right. Let's go back to the Braves. St. John Bosco back at home taking on Paramount. This is another game I think is, Bosco's dealing with the same kind of thing as Mater Dei. They're looking at a running clock, probably another shutout. Paramount is 1-2. They're from the San Gabriel Valley League. That's Division 4. So, it's obviously a huge step up for the Pirates and Coach Matt Howard. Paramount opened the season with a pretty good win on the road at Mission Hills, a pretty good program. Mission Hills is 0-3 though, but Paramount did beat them 26-18. Then, Paramount playing a great schedule that they're playing. They lost to Bishop Ammont, a Division I team, 21-6, and then they played Bakersfield, who we know from the Servite game, and they lost to Servite. Paramount lost to Bakersfield, 41-21. What's your thoughts on them coming into the Trinity League here and taking on St. John Bosco?
This is going to be an interesting game because what looked to be a formidable opponent has just kind of become another running clock game. This is almost a carbon copy of the St. Mary's game, because Paramount was actually had a solid season, 11-2 last year, and they had returning some good skills, but it hasn't translated on the field. And they did lose, like you mentioned, Ammont and the Bakersfield, I have no idea how they lost to that Bakersfield team after watching what I watched.
You were surprised.
Their lone win is against Mission Hills of San Marcos, 28-16. But I look for the goose egg in this one. And this one is actually kind of like a mini rivalry game, because it's interesting, a lot of the kids that transfer out of Bosco go to Paramount. When they leave, so they have a lot of kids in their program. I'm not so sure many now, but in the past, a lot of kids, when they leave Bosco, they've gone to Paramount. So, but this will be over early.
Yeah. Yeah, I fielded one question from on from one reader and listener who asked me. I believe it's the fellow's name is Bryce Sawyer. I hope I have it right, Bryce. But I appreciate you listening and your feedback. But he asked me an interesting question. Was basically one of the words he used is he said, "Is the St. John Bosco schedule, basically it was just one of its uninspiring, underwhelming." I think might have been one of the words he used, but I don't know. I mean, obviously that Milani team was pretty good, but next week's going to be probably the best game for Bosco, and when they take on Chaminade. But what's your response on that question about describing the Bosco schedule? Where I know Tim View is 2-1, but they lost 49-0 to Bosco.
And I'm going to say this, and I had the same discussion because somebody asked the same thing to me about the modern day schedule, and it is very difficult to schedule, and people think it is easier than it is, and it is not. And because in Bosco's situation, they had 2 games fall out. They can't get certain teams, or they want to get these big matchups, but nobody wants to travel, or they want you to fit the bill, and they think that because they're private schools, they have Bosco, Mater Dei, they have money coming out the ears that they can just fit the bill and pay for everybody. And it's not that cut and dry. And so sometimes they have to take what they can get.
Okay.
And it's going to get harder every year because if Bosco and Mater Dei can keep winning and keep playing, you're going to have to pick up these national games, and sometimes they don't always pan out, or there's a school that thinks they have an up-and-coming team and they want to get a look to see how they can play with these big teams, and then it doesn't come to certain things happen, and it doesn't pan out, and that's kind of maybe what's happened with these games. I mean, they look good on paper, but then when it's said and done, Bosco and Mater Dei are nationally ranked for a reason. And like a lot of these teams can probably play with everybody else, but just when it comes down to it, they're not on that near that level. And that's basically what it comes down to. Yes, it's kind of as a football fan, you wish to see something else because you're tired of these blowouts. And then sometimes, when they match up with the better team, they're going to say, oh, their strength of schedule didn't help them out. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes it hasn't. But, we'll just have to wait and see. But for everybody out there, scheduling is not an easy thing to do. And I don't care what anybody says. They think it's cut and dry, and it's not. So.
Yeah. And like this year, it's the 1 year, Mater Dei plays Gorman, and, it's the first time Gorman's been shut out in 12 years or something like that. And it's, this is after Gorman's played some great games against Bosco in the past, and they played great games against Servite, and they played games against Santa Margarita and had classic kind of type games that got people excited. And then this year, it's ESPN, national television, and at Gorman, season opener for Gorman, and it's 42-0. So you never know how it's going to go, and maybe this Cherry Creek team will stick around, Scotty, and they'll start to get into the fold after their win. Maybe somebody will get something go with more Cherry Creek. I wonder if that's a 2-year deal with Cherry Creek and Santa Margarita. I'll have to find out about that.
Yeah, I don't know about that one either. I know Santa Margarita is like another school that has played. I think later on they're going to play in another out-of-state opponent, if I'm not mistaken. I know JSerra plays 2 out-of-state opponents. See, all these schools are starting to make that because it's harder to schedule. And another thing is and I know there's a lot of griping on this part, is that when they keep talking about, because nobody wants to play these quote unquote all-star teams, that's what you're going to get. Yes and no, but also you want to play the best so that you can prepare for your other games in your own division. So
yeah, and then even as we get to we get closer to the another out-of-state team like the IMG game, that's going to be a one-off, right, Scotty? Because of the Southern Section rules, as far as all-star teams, that's just games that's going to happen 1 year, because I believe the next year the rules for the Southern section will be that you can't play a team like IMG because, the makeup of their school and schedule is just so radically different than everybody else's, right?
Right, correct. Yeah, that is. They got that win right under the wire. So
yeah. So you can cross out IMG next year. So if you want to see those guys play, this is going to be a great game coming up, and we'll have plenty of cover. We'll have wall-to-wall coverage on that one. But Scotty, let's also talk about, speaking of Santa Margarita, the Eagles are going to be back at Tribuco Hills on Friday, playing host to Mayfair. That is a 7 o'clock kickoff. Santa Margarita, like we said, on a 2-game slide, but they play Mayfair 3-0. That's a Division 6 team at a suburban league. I think this is a game that Santa Margarita is going to get back on track and get Castelli, the young sophomore, back on track. And they've been playing pretty good, but I think they get back in the win column this week.
Yeah, they got another undefeated, opponent coming in against the Eagles, but it way resembles Cherry Creek. So Mayfair's posted wins over 1-2 Long Beach Wilson 50-14, a 1-2 Whittier, California High of Whittier 39-21, and an 0-2 Lakewood 20-6. But like two key players to watch for are a 4-star safety for Mayfair, Chris Adamora. He's committed to Texas, University of Texas, and quarterback Joshua Calvin, who's thrown for 7 touchdowns and no interceptions. And then Adamora, he only has 4 catches for 102 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he's probably a spot duty on offense, but he's an electric player. The Eagles should get a win. It's not guaranteed, but let's see if Mayfair secondaries can keep Peter Caselli at bay. But I think Santa Margarita strength will win out on this one. Yeah,
nice research, Scotty, for sure. And I just going by what you said, so the opponent's record for Mayfair is 2-6. Those guys, they're not going to be able to hang with a Santa Margarita team that's just coming off playing Mission Viejo and Cherry Creek. So I expect the Eagles to roll. So and I think that takes us through our 4 Friday games. We have Servite, we talked about, Mater Dei, Paramount, and St. John Bosco, and Santa Margarita. So now we have to switch to JSerra playing on Saturday, playing an out-of-state team in Pinnacle of Arizona. This game is going to be at Moore Park. I got a kickoff time of 4:30 on Saturday. So kind of a showcase type game for JSerra. Playing a really challenging schedule. Playing Corona Del Mar, that's looked great since that season opening win. They played Calabasas, who bounced back and got a win, and Bishop Amont, who's pretty good team. They have an extra win because of the forfeit against Mater Dei, but obviously they showed how well they can play last week. Now you got Pinnacle, who maybe might be the best team that JSerra's played. They're 3-0. They're a Division 6A team, which is a strong divisional ranking out of Arizona. Like you said, they're ranked number 2 in that state. What do you think about this game, Scotty?
Yeah, so Pinnacle, right now they're the 44th national ranked team by Max Preps. And then, they're going to be JSerra's, toughest test so far. And unlike Calabasas, who had the skill positions but no linemen, this one's going to feature a top-notch quarterback in Spencer Rattler, who I won the Nike opening this summer. But he's been injured the last 2 games. So he sat out last week's game, but he's being reported as he's coming back for this game. But it's supposedly an ankle injury, so we'll see how well he's done. He's thrown for 5 touchdowns, 491 yards in 2 games. But it's his junior backup quarterback, J.D. Johnson. He's done a heck of a job in his absence, as he was 18 of 26 for 401 yards and 4 TDs in their win last week. And actually, Johnson has played in all 3 games and thrown for 7 touchdowns and 0 interceptions for 651 yards and 72 completion percentage. So it looks like there's no drop off on talent. But something to take a note, despite scoring, they've scored 164 points in their 3 wins. So they've scored 59, 56, and 49 points over a 2-1 Perry, a 1-1 Mountain Point, and an 0-3 Horizon. So however you want to take that. But they've also given up a lot of points because they've given up over 30 points per game. So JSerra, we'll see what happens. If you can get your passing game, this may be one of those games where it may be a high-scoring game. Or if JSerra's defense can contain these guys, maybe these guys, because they give up 30 points per game, JSerra can, get their numbers up. But, as far as their athletes go, Pinnacle has pretty good guys, and Spencer Rattler is a great talent.
Yeah.
But we'll just have to wait and see how mobile he can be. But this other kid looks like he's doing a hell of a job. So,
yeah, man, that's quite a backup there. But against, you wonder what kind of quality. But still, this is a big game for JSerra. They're off to a great start, 3-0. Probably want to get a little bit more points going offensively. The defense has been consistent. You look ahead to them. Next week, JSerra is at home. That week being September 14th against Faith Lutheran of Las Vegas, Nevada, who I think they should handle pretty easily. And then they get their bye week before they take on St. John Bosco. So Lancers getting close to gearing up for the Trinity League, and this will be one more test on a Saturday night up in Moore Park, and we'll have to watch the injuries, see if we get any injury updates this week. But that could be a fantastic game. And then the team that has a bye this week is Orange Lutheran. They're not back in action until they take on Heritage of Romo Land, Inland Empire, really strong Inland Empire team, and that game's not until September 14th, and that's going to be a road game for the Lancers. So, Scotty, as we wrap up our Trinity League Football Podcast, and thanks to everybody who's stuck with us here tonight and all season, what were your impressions of one JT Daniels and Amon-Ra as they made their college debuts for USC against at the Coliseum against UNLV?
You know what? I wasn't surprised. I mean, JT did his same JT as he always is. He did. What was apparent was you could see that him and Amon-Ra are on. I mean, he threw those slants. He was on the money with hitting Amon, but he seemed to be off with Tyler Vaughn's. I mean, he targeted Tyler Vaughn's, I think, about 8 times before he got a completion. But they just seemed to be off for some reason, or he dropped the ball. He hit Pittman, I think, on a couple of. He would have had 2 more touchdowns to go with his one touchdown. Pittman dropped a couple, but by far, it was a great first. Thinking he's supposed to be here playing high school ball. He should be playing next week. And here he's playing a college football game. And UNLV wasn't that bad. I mean, they actually looked a lot better than I thought. But it was kind of fun to watch them two guys kind of hook up, and like they said, it was all modern day scoring because Chase McGrath made all the field goals. Yeah. JT made Amon connected on that touchdown. So for a bit it was all modern day for a bit. So, but I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do here out. It's going to get more challenging. I think his performance, was probably, I think I saw in the paper today that it was like the best freshman performance of all the USC quarterbacks, including Barkley and Carson Palmer and Brent, and going back to Brent Johnson. So
Rob Johnson.
Rob Johnson,
right.
Correct me. Yeah. So, it was just kind of, seeing him since he's been basically in 7th grade to seeing him playing in a USC game was kind of fun to watch. So,
yeah, I think, and I thought UNLV looked pretty good. I don't know if people are thinking that they're going to be pretty good this year, but they look good in that game. I thought they played well. I didn't think early on. I was thinking that USC's receivers weren't helping out JT as much, and it made me think about some of the receivers that are on the market, specifically from the Trinity League this year. That as you project this, what USC's offense could be like, but you just wonder if I don't know if anybody was thinking this at the same time when those SC receivers didn't look that great. If people were at home thinking, man, we need Kyle Ford next year with Amon-Ra. We need to put them together. We need Brew McCoy out there as well. And we need to have JT with Brew McCoy, Kyle Ford, and Amon-Ra. That's our trio. I don't know if anybody else was thinking that, but what I was seeing, I was thinking that.
Yeah, I mean, in the Trinity League bubble, I think you would say that. But I mean, those two receivers are hell of a players, Vaughns and Pittman. But I was shocked that they looked the way they did, because if that was your first time seeing them, you would have never figured that those two receivers were 5-star guys. And but I can agree. And I know that they want Kyle Ford, and I know with Brew they want Brew. That would be a hell of a tandem over there. Kind of there's only one ball to go around, but I know that as a core that would be just one great core. But I'll give those other two guys a pass. I know it would have given JT better stats. It would have given him a better look as far as him just having an okay performance. But when you talk to Helton, he did everything right. He did everything he was supposed to do. I think the two things that he didn't was, I think he got sacked once or twice, and then he forced one ball. But I mean, for what he had to do, I mean, it was a solid performance.
Yeah, for a guy that didn't have a ton of time to get ready for this, graduating early, and he had to hit all those classes. And then the other thing I didn't think about this, but it was really interesting for me to see him in the pistol, and we didn't get to seen him roll out more, seen him run that pistol, much different than the modern day's traditional spread. So it's been a huge, he did a lot of things different with the handoffs, all the different personnel. But it was pretty strange to see him in the pistol, and I think he's got to get rid of it sometimes quicker. Learn how to throw it away, and I think he's the one pick he should have got picked at one time if UNLV could have come up with it, but probably not locking on his receivers a little bit and looking the guys off and scanning the field a little bit more. Things for him to work on. What did you think about him running that pistol?
It's pretty much similar to the spread as far as he's still in the shotgun, but you're just up close and you got the back behind you instead of the side, and just gives you a little bit more of an option. He can, I think you give him anything and he'll command it. It's just a matter of time, and you go back to I go back to looking at his first start with Mater Dei, because he basically had to come in off the bench when McDonald broke his hand. And that following week, he got the first start, and it was actually a year ago last week, or not a year ago, but it was many years ago. Yeah. Because it was the same La Mirada week in La Mirada. That's where he threw 7 touchdowns, in his first start, and he could have easily, I don't want to say easily, but he could have had 3. I think it could have opened him up a little bit, more. He could have easily had a little bit more. Yeah. But you can just see it happening. You can see it growing. God willing, that he stays healthy and then that the line holds up. I think he's going to have a good year. So,
yeah, definitely a great start. And I think Amon-Ra was, as a freshman, he was the best receiver out there on the field. And guys catching everything, guys getting open. The burst looked great, and future looks bright. Played a lot of Amon-Ra in the slot. That was kind of interesting, seeing him inside most of the time. But maybe at his height and where he's at, I think the slot might suit him pretty well.
Yeah, well, he'll play all over, but I think it's the easiest to get him the ball in the slot because you get the matchup. But he can definitely, I think, he caught, I think, every ball. I think all of his catches, I think, were almost like 50-50. I think he caught 7 balls, but I think most of them, I think 4 were from the slot, and then the 3 were from the outside. So
okay, yeah, and we got another couple of Trinity League alums, of course, going up this week against each other in the Pac-12 conference, with JT Daniels of Mater Dei taking on KJ Costello from Santa Margarita. So that could be there's some bragging rights on the line, and they faced each other before, as we know, Scotty, in the Trinity League.
I think that was when JT was the sophomore.
Yep, sophomore year.
Still, yeah.
Yep, I remember seeing them play. I believe that year they played a pretty competitive game at the Bowl, Santa Ana Bowl, if I'm not mistaken. So I might have to do some more research on that one, but that's what I remember. Those guys battling at the Bowl, and that. But anyway, Scotty, are you going to be headed over to the Bowl this Friday to take on see Mater Dei take on St. Mary's?
I will be at the Bowl, and then hopefully, I don't know, depending on my schedule, we'll see if I might get a look at JSerra, but we'll have to wait and see on that one.
All right. Well, I believe I'm going to be seeing another public school showdown this week, which is looking to see Mission Viejo, which has got a win against Santa Margarita, 30-20. Those Diablos are taking on Villa Park, and Purdue committed quarterback Paul Peferi, and that game's over at El Medina on Friday. So I'm interested to see if Mission Viejo can keep it going. They're trying to go 4-0. It's all kind of grinding one out against against La Habra, 28-14 game on Friday. And an ex Trinity League star did very well for Mission Viejo. That's JoJo Forrest. Had a former Orange Lutheran player, did outstanding. He was kind of the player of the game for the Diablos. Interception return, long touchdown reception that he did a lot of the work, most of the work on a short screen. So that's the game I'm going to be at. But what are your thoughts on the Diablos so far, Scotty? They still have Upland to play, and they still have Orange Lutheran to play before they even get to the pretty good looking South Coast League.
Yeah, I mean, was not surprised so much. I mean, Joey Yellen has kind of been that catalyst, for them. He's kind of, made them might go. And I know JoJo Forrest has been, I think, the difference maker on both sides of the ball with him and Achille Arnold. So they kind of relied on those two guys. And then you throw in Jamari Farrell, who's kind of, added, a little go with his feet. The only thing I was kind of surprised on is that the offense, it's kind of been they've done enough. They've gone to that 28 point range, that 35 point range. They haven't really but they've kept the other teams from doing more than they kept them at 7 to 14 points as well. So defensively, it's kind of similar to like what JSerra is doing, on that front. Their offense has just done enough, hasn't been like world beaters, but then they'll come up with like the big plays when needed. And I don't see anybody else doing anything other than I think they would be interesting with it because we see Lolu, right? Isn't that one on the schedule?
Yeah, Olu, but they still have that game is September 21st at Orange Coast College. But I think Mission Viejo plays Upland before that game.
Before that, okay.
And,
so I think those two tests will probably be more the two tests than what they've got. So we'll see what happens then.
Well, I'm interested to check out how good Villa Park is. So I'm looking forward to that game. But Scotty, great job tonight. We heard some great analysis on that Orange Lutheran breakdown. Gave me some. We definitely got to try to get some comments from Coach Presley of the Lancers. Some really good breakdown on the JSerra and some things that they got to work on with Caden Bell. So some good insight on that scheduling. So the non-league scheduling and the out-of-state competitions and for teams like Mater Dei and St. John Bosco. So great job once again, Scotty.
Oh, you're welcome, Dan, and welcome. I'm glad we're get to talk this every single week. So.
All righty. Well, for Scott Barajas, I'm Dan Albano, and I want to thank you again for listening to us on the Trinity League Football Podcast.